Good morning, everyone. Welcome to another session. ACFO presents Wednesday webinars. Again, I'm Danny, hosting from Gatineau. Very happy to have you guys here with us today. On today's webcast, we're talking about emotional intelligence. I can't tell you how important emotional intelligence. In fact, if there's one thing I'd recommend everyone to get a better grasp on, it is emotional intelligence. I include myself into this. For my own personal career, had I been more aware of emotional intelligence and how it's a game changer, I would have focused that much earlier in my career. So to discuss the topic, let's go a quick glance over to Lauren Doty. Lauren, hello.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for having me today.
Lauren, thank you very much for joining us. I know that you've done this presentation. It's very difficult because normally this is a full day of training and we got to condense into maybe a half an hour to 45 minutes. It's going to be tough. But before we get to Lauren, I just want to give you guys an update. This is our regular COVID-19 update. I mentioned last week that the real dialogue happening with Treasury Board at OCRO is the eventual resumption of duties, return to work, whatever how departments are calling it, because we want to work with the employer not to discuss the date, but rather the how, the methodology behind how we will slowly reintegrate. And I mentioned last week, there's really 5 criteria now to determine how this will happen. The first one is your location. Where do you live? You're in a city that's more vulnerable than another one, or the higher COVID rates. Obviously, that makes sense. The second one is your function. What kind of job do you do? Do you have a job that requires you to return to the office, or can you telework? Which again, that makes sense. We're fine with that one. Third one is which office are you located in? So not just the city, but does your office workspace allow for the social distancing? Fourth one is the infrastructure. So are the buses back on, or daycares back on? And the fifth one that it's going to be kept considered, and probably the most important one, is your own personal circumstances. So perhaps you are what's the word I'm looking for? Deficient or immune. You have certain sensitivities that you're taking care of people that you can't risk having COVID. So those 5 factors we understand and we agree with. That makes sense. What we are more concerned about now is how will it happen? So say for example, your city, you can return to work, daycare is there and you need to return to work. Well, how's it going to work when you go into an elevator? If you can't maintain the 2 meters of social distance, and I can tell you this is challenging. So up to this point, ever since COVID happened, we've had a very good dialogue with the highest of decision makers. But I will tell you this, that with the return to work policies being developed right now, all the unions are on the same page, which is that we're not being given proper consultation. I mean, I've had documents here. Actually, look, I'll show you this one here. Wait, look at this. Okay, I know this is bad. You can probably see this. Look at this. This is an office chart. So there's 8 offices here, 8 desks. And what they're saying is, well, we're going to be able to maintain the 2 meters distance because it's designed this way. Yeah, well, that is if no one moves. So if everyone stays static and no one moves in their desk, we got 2 meters distance. Well, that's not reality. The reality is there's circulation. People are in elevators. There's washrooms. There's common areas like kitchens. What about alleyways? We're going up and down. So will we be providing employees with masks? Well, I know Justin Trudeau just announced that Safe and Healthy is going to announce something about masks, but we need to have the concrete information so that your safety is not being put at risk. We're not jeopardizing anything by rushing the return to work. So the message for now is, if your manager or your department is asking you to return to work, if you're an ACFO member, I would find that very surprising. Simply because most of our members do not need to be physically in the workspace to perform their duties. So if it doesn't make sense to you, you that know your duties, give us a call, send us an email. We can walk you through this because we don't want you to be returning to work if it's not safe or you don't feel comfortable. So I don't think there's a rush to return to work. I know certain departments such as Veteran Affairs and ACOA, the Atlantic Canada Opportunity Agency, they've said they don't suspect any return to work up until Labor Day. So there's really no rush unless you really have a specific job that you do that needs to be in the office. So that's in terms of the return to work. And I wish I could give you more information, but there's really no rush. If you feel like you're being told to return to work, please contact us. The other thing I want to talk about is the vacation days. You might not be aware of this because I wasn't when I was working back at PSBC, but in your collective agreement, there's a provision regarding vacation. So you earn your vacation days and you can take them, you can roll some over. Because right now everyone is working from home, we can't travel. No one's going to go, on a trip because we can't have any social interaction. A lot of people are not taking their vacation days, which means that perhaps at the end of the year, there's going to have a much more bigger chunk of rollover days that exceed the days that we normally transfer over. Now, the employer, we've seen this in certain departments are scheduling, they're planning vacation days. And we've had members contact us and ask us, hey, can my boss tell me when to take my vacation? The answer is kind of. They can work out a plan with you so that to ensure you're taking your vacation, but it has to be reasonable. So, for example, if your manager says, hey, Danny, next week you're going to be taking a week off, well, that's not really sufficient time for me to plan something, and it's also not convenient for me. But a manager can definitely have a dialogue with you right now and say, you know what? I want to make sure you're going to be using, I don't know, your 20 vacation days this year. Can you give me a plan as to when you're going to use them? Which I know is difficult because planning vacation might depend on what's happening 3 or 4 months from now, and we don't know that yet. But just so you know, we're going to be issuing a communique today on our website that describes what I just said, basically. And my message to you guys is, if anyone is forcing you to take vacation that's not convenient for you, definitely give us a call. We can walk you through that as well. The last thing I want to talk about is flexible work schedule. So some of you before COVID, we're doing telework, but not 5 days a week, obviously. And you were on compressed schedule. Certain of you are working different hours. And we're seeing that certain departments are starting to reduce that flexibility. I mean, I've seen some at ESDC where they're being told, if you are teleworking, which everyone is, you can't do your compressed schedule anymore. And the members weren't provided with a valid reason. There's such a thing called operational requirements, which does exist, but it can be very vague. And again, the rationale behind this is always the same. If it doesn't make sense to you, or if you feel you're being treated unfairly, please contact us at ACFO so we can assess your situation and figure out a way, the best way to actually approach the employer. And we do this using emotional intelligence. So that's all the update I have for you guys today. Before I throw it over to Lauren for her presentation, how are we going to interact with Lauren and myself today? As we always do, it is Slido, S-L-I-D-O. I'm sure you guys are aware of it by now. So you go on slido.com and you put in the code ACFO-ACAF. It's written right over here. And once you have that code, it'll lead you into our group conversation here where you can ask your questions anonymously to Lauren. And also you guys can vote up which questions you'd like her to answer first, because we might not have a chance to get all the questions. So very happy we have Lauren here today. And Lauren, I will throw it over for you for your presentation, and then we'll take some questions. Lauren, over to you.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm so excited to be talking about this topic today. So a little bit about myself. I am certified in the EQI 2.0 model, which is what I'm going to be talking about today. And also I'm currently pursuing my associate coach certification from the International Coach Federation. So I might end up talking a little bit about coaching and some of my experiences that I've had with my training, but I'm just going to jump right into it because I know that we don't have a lot of time. And normally I like to keep things like fun and interactive. So I'm probably going to throw it over to Danny a few times, keep him on his toes, and ask him some questions, make it more of a conversation, and then we'll answer some questions at the end. But just to give you an idea of what we'll talk about today, we're going to talk about emotional intelligence, or EQ, what it is and why it matters. And then we'll talk about the EQI 2.0 model, which is what I mentioned at the top. We'll talk about 5 key competencies that I really think are extremely important during COVID-19. They're always important, but especially important now. And then we'll talk about the action plan, because it's great if you tune in to a 45-minute keynote, you learn some interesting facts, and then you go back to work and you do the same old thing that you've always been doing. So what I want to do is be able to set you up for success. So how you can take away what you've learned today and actually apply it. And then at the end, hopefully we'll have time for questions so that I can answer any burning desired questions that you might have. So what is emotional intelligence? So emotional intelligence is the ability to recognize, understand, and manage our own emotions and the emotions of others, especially under pressure. So when I talk about under pressure, COVID-19 is a very good example of pressure that you could be under. You might have a lot more responsibilities at home. You might have a lot more responsibilities at work. You might have both that you're trying to juggle. So this is really when your emotional intelligence can shine. It's how you perceive and express yourself. It's how we develop and maintain social relationships. It's how we cope with challenges, and it's how we use emotional information in an effective and meaningful way. And then there's also the discussion of nature and nurture. So sometimes people say, oh, you're either born with emotional intelligence or you don't, or you're not. But it's actually something that you can work on over time. And it's evidence in the fact that with IQ, for most people, your IQ tends to peak when you're about 17 or 18 years old. But then with your EQ, it actually tends to peak when you're older, when you have more life experience, when you're able to put more time into your practice. So if you really put in the time and effort, emotional intelligence is something that you'll actually be able to improve and get better at as you put in the effort. And it also makes or breaks an excellent leader. If you think about all of the people in your lives that have been excellent leaders, whether it was a parent, whether it was a manager, whether it was a coach, normally there's always somebody who you can think of who showed great leadership skills. And when you think of the competencies that made that person an excellent leader, it often has to do with the fact that they had a high level of emotional intelligence. So this is really something that you can improve for yourself, that you can improve for the people around you. It really tends to really show whether or not a leader has what it takes, and it gets you noticed. So oftentimes when people get promoted within departments, it's because of their emotional intelligence that they demonstrate and not just their hard skills. And now for the EQI 2.0 model. So today I'm going to be talking about 5 competencies from the model that you see on your screen. So there's 5 different composite scales that you can see. And then for each composite scale, there's 3 subscales. So it starts at the top with self-perception. So it's really how you fit into the world around you, how you see yourself, the level of confidence that you have. And when you develop those skills, that's how you express yourself. So that's when you get into the self-expression composite scale. And then as you express yourself well, that's how you build relationships, so the interpersonal. And then it leads one into the other, and they all relate to one another from the emotional and social functioning, well-being, and performance that you see on the outside ring. And I would love to talk to you about all 15 competencies today, but we only have time to talk about 5, which I really think are incredibly important, especially during COVID-19, because it has to do with resiliency, it has to do with staying optimistic, it really has to do with getting through this time and being able to shine, not just as an employee or as a manager, but also just in your day-to-day life. And we'll start with self-actualization. So you'll see in the top corner when I go through the different slides where in the EQI 2.0 model the competencies that I'll be talking about will fit into the greater picture. So we're going to start with self-actualization. So as I go through these competencies, I want you to keep in mind when I describe high self-actualization or low self-actualization, where do you think you fit in? Do you think that you relate more to the high, more to the low, or maybe somewhere in the middle? So if you demonstrate a high level of self-actualization, you're able to live a life of meaning, purpose, and fulfillment. And you're willing to persistently improve yourself. So whether it's improving your fitness and your health by going to the gym, by eating right, whether it's constantly wanting to improve your soft skills, your hard skills by doing training, by gathering feedback. This is really a marker of someone who has a high level of self-actualization, who's dedicated to being constantly a better version of themselves. But then there's a dark side. So every competency that I talk about, we're going to talk about a dark side, which is essentially if you're too high in a certain competency, then you might actually have some potentially negative side effects as a result. So with the dark side of high self-actualization, you might never be fully happy with what you have. You might always be pushing for the next thing. So I'll give you a very quick example. I love to read. I am an avid reader. I read any type of book, fiction, nonfiction, any genre, I'll read it. And last year, I made the goal for myself. I'm going to read 52 books this year. I'm going to read a book a week. And I managed to get there by August. And so instead of celebrating the fact that I read 52 books, instead what I said to myself is, no, I'm going to read 75 books. I'm going to read even more. And it became more about the goal than it actually became about enjoying the books and reading the books for fun. So that's a small example of that. And it also can be frustration with others not living up to their potential. So if you are somebody who's constantly pushing others to be better, this is how it could show up. And you might, if there's someone around you that's not as self-actualized, it might show up in this sense. But then if you're low in self-actualization, you might have a lack of motivation, or you might not be feeling fulfilled. You might not have that desire to improve. You don't really have that driving purpose in your life that's pushing you. So I'll throw it over to Danny for this one. So Danny, would you say that you are high self-actualization, low self-actualization, or somewhere in the middle? And can you give me a bit of context?
Yeah, I mean, I'm a numbers guy, so say low is 0 and high is 10. I'd say maybe an 8, because I think you're right where you want to have motivation, you want to improve, but if it's too much, it doesn't work. And for me, my challenge is always I'll do a job for a while, work, and after a while, I get maybe bored with it because there's lacking challenges. And my past career, when I was working at PSPC, I maybe it takes me too long before I realize, you know what, I need more meaning here. Let's get some more challenges going. So I'd say 7 or 8, because you always want to go and consistently improve, but sometimes I might need a little kick in the butt to do more. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So if you're looking for a little bit of a kick in the butt, I have some tips for you that I can share. So some strategies for development: conducting a self-appraisal of your passions and values. So you can do this for your work, and you can also do it for your life. So if you're not really sure what it is that your passions and your values are, you could even just do a quick Google search of like list of values, and normally there'll be a ton of different words, whether it's family, adventure, pleasure, self-improvement. There'll be tons of different words, and if you want, you can print this out, or you can copy them in a Word document and just highlight the ones that stand out to you. And then what you could do is take all these words that you've highlighted and put them in a list, and then prioritize the list. So figure out what is my top value or my top passion when it comes to my work. And then you can do this again for your life. And then find ways to schedule and incorporate these values in your life. If you find that you've put this list together and you recognize none of these things in your work, or you recognize none of these things in your life, then you can find ways to actually put them into your life. And there's always the expression of, oh, I don't have enough time. I don't have enough time to do this or enough time to do that. And that can be especially easy to say during COVID-19 when there's so many things that are piling up. But what might be a better question to ask is this a priority? And if it is a priority, then you'll find the time. So even if it's just sneaking something in for 5-10 minutes at a time, say you put family as your #1 priority, and you're not really making time to spend time with your family, even if it's taking 10 minutes at lunchtime to play with your kids and to chat with your family, just find little ways that you can incorporate these things into your life. And then take on a new challenge. I know that PMAs are coming up for a lot of people, and PMAs are a great way that you can bring up the fact that you might not be very self-actualized in your work. It might be an opportunity to say, I really love working for this organization and I love what I do, but I feel like I'm not being challenged enough, and I'd love to take on another challenge for this organization and for this team. And not only will it show great initiative on your part, but it'll also give you some other motivation to be able to contribute to the team. Because if you find your role right now is maybe very, I don't want to use the word boring, but not challenging enough for you, then really take the opportunity to take that initiative and maybe have that conversation with your manager. And lastly, this one is important for maybe the Dannys and the Laurens of the world who are self-actualized for the most part and find that you might be saying to yourself, oh, I should be doing more with my time in quarantine. I should be exercising more. I should be, going outside more. I should be spending more time with my family. Don't beat yourself up, because this is a really, really difficult time. There's so much going on right now. It can be really taxing emotionally, mentally. So just give yourself a break and realize that just making it through this quarantine is an accomplishment in and of itself. Just the fact that you're here today, that you're willing to learn more about emotional intelligence, that you're putting in that time, that in and of itself is also an accomplishment. So keep those things in mind. And now emotional self-awareness. So this is still in the self-perception category. And this one is really about being able to recognize and be in touch with your emotions. And it's differentiating between the subtleties as well. So not just if you're feeling happy, but are you feeling elated? Are you feeling peaceful? Are you feeling calm? Different words that you can use to differentiate between those subtleties. And then also understanding the cause and the impact of your emotions. So if you find that you know what your triggers are, when you have particularly strong emotional reactions to things, you know what's causing those reactions, and you know the impact that your emotions have on others. So for example, if you're really prone to angry outbursts, but you realize that you do this and you know what tends to cause it, you can get better in the future at being able to stop those reactions in their tracks when you know that it's coming or when you know the emotion that you're experiencing. But the dark side, if you have too much emotional self-awareness, is that you might tend to overthink things. You might really ruminate on the emotions that you're experiencing and focus on some insignificant details that might not actually matter. And you're really missing the big picture of why or really what you can actually do to prevent these kind of negative emotions that you're experiencing. But then if you're low in emotional self-awareness, you might really have a lack of awareness around the emotions that you're experiencing. You don't know what your triggers are, and you don't know what the impact of your emotions are on others. So personally, I would say I'm somewhere in the middle for this one. I am very good at knowing what my triggers are and what the emotions I'm experiencing are. But I think that something that I do need to work on is the subtleties and understanding the differences between those really positive emotions and maybe the not so positive. But Danny, what about you? Would you say that you're high in emotional self-awareness, low, or somewhere in the middle?
Yeah, I love this one. To me, this is how I was first exposed to emotional intelligence and just understanding your own emotions, where you're at. And I would say if I go back a decade when I first started my career in the public service, I was definitely on the low end. I failed to realize that I need to understand what emotion I'm feeling, because that's when we see this at ACFO and people go off and crazy and write things by email, or they'll scream at people because they're not understanding where they stand right now. And I'm guilty of this. It's not only for your career, but for your own personal life, dealing with your relationships that you have with your family, with other loved ones. It's something. It all starts with emotional self-awareness. That was my ticket to understanding. You know what? The email I wrote yesterday, I don't feel that way anymore, and I could see how I was offset. So I was struggling with this at the beginning. I'm doing more nowadays as I familiarize myself with the theory. But also when this happens in real time, how do I be more self-aware of, okay, what is it I'm feeling right now? Is it rage? Is it anger? Is it joy? And there's different subtleties between those. And being the more mature you get, the better you are at dealing with this and actually identifying what you're feeling.
Yes, exactly. And it's a difficult practice, but it is something that you can improve, as Danny said, if you put in the time and as you mature. So for example, if Danny maybe had this tool when he was in his workplace, it might have helped him identify those specific emotions he was experiencing. So this is the mood meter. Hopefully you're able to see the words that are on there. If not, feel free to just Google mood meter, and there's probably an image that will look very similar to this that you can find. And you'll see that there's a scale on both the X and Y axis. So there's a pleasantness scale, where you can map yourself on a scale of 1 to 10, how pleasant is this emotion that I'm feeling? And then on a scale of 1 to 10, how energetic is this emotion? So if I'm going to map this emotion that I'm experiencing right now, I'd say pleasantness, I'm at about a 9. I'm happy to be here. I'm pleased to be talking about the subject and sharing it with all of you. And then energy, also about a 9. Because I'm happy and because I'm feeling pleasant. I had some caffeine this morning, so I'm feeling good. So if I map the 9 and 9, I'm at inspired. So I'm feeling inspired talking to you today about this subject. Danny, what about you? Where are you on the scale?
Right now, I'm excited. So I'm on both sides. Where's that? I'm definitely pleasant. I have energy. Where would I be on that one? Elated, maybe? I mean, as long as you're in the yellow, it feels good. I like that one. That's positive
Yes.
emotion. So, and that's why it's so hard, because it's not an exact science, right? To me, there's one side or the other, but finding exactly where you're at, as long as we can identify in which radius am I in, it's definitely a step in the right direction. It's something that you don't necessarily think of, but look at all that range. How many words there that are like, okay, this is different than that one. And just being aware that our range of emotions can be completely different. We've got to have a better understanding of where we stand in terms of our emotions.
Yeah, absolutely. But if you are feeling that you're struggling to be able to pinpoint what those emotions are, you can try to plot yourself on that mood meter. You could print it out, you could save it on your computer, you could refer to it frequently and figure out where it is that you're mapping on the scale. And then you can also really identify some key points that will help you kind of prevent these situations in the future of your emotions getting the best of you and potentially having outbursts or even negative impacts on your career or in your home life, is by identifying your triggers. So whenever you're experiencing a particular emotion, take the time to map it on that mood meter and then ask, what caused me to experience this emotion? What was the physical manifestation? So how did you feel in your body? How did you feel like you were really tense? Did you feel like there was a tightness in your chest? What were you feeling? And then also the shifts in your emotions. So if this emotion went away, what caused that shift? Was it time? Was it talking it out with somebody else? So figuring out those steps and potentially thinking of a past situation. So if you're not really in the throes of something at the moment, but maybe last week you are having a particularly tough day, identify the emotion, the triggers, how it appeared in your body, and then what happened. Did it go away? Were you able to address it? Was there potentially a conversation you might not have been ready to have that you had a bit too soon? So if you're able to map these things out, if you can name that emotion, you can tame the emotion because you're able to see it more objectively, and you can predict when these types of things might happen again if you know precisely what those triggers might be. And then you can ask for feedback. So this is really the impact on others. So if you don't really know what kind of impact your emotions have on people, you can ask for feedback. You can have a conversation with your manager, or you can even, if you have staff, you can talk to your employees about this. And it's really a great way to generate trust between you, whether it's your manager or your team, because it shows that you're open to receiving feedback and you're open to having that conversation of what is it that I could possibly do a bit better, or how is it that my emotions might be impacting you in a negative way or in a positive way too, because it is important to know if your positive emotions are having an impact on others, that you want to keep that up so that you can spread that within your team. And now we'll get to empathy, which I will probably spend the most time talking about because this is so important right now during COVID-19, because there are so many people who are going through a lot of difficult situations, whether, responsibilities are piling up at home, or you have to take over a lot of work from your coworkers who might not be able to work because they're on 699 leave. There's a lot happening right now in the public service, and so it's really important to be able to demonstrate empathy, not just with your colleagues, with your employees, but also just with the people around you, your friends, your family. So what does high empathy look like? It's recognizing, appreciating, and respecting others' feelings. And it's listening to understand. So a lot of times you can tell when someone is really listening to you, or whether they're just kind of thinking of the next point that they want to bring up. Whereas listening to understand, you feel that connection with someone. They're maintaining eye contact, they're nodding, they're reflecting the things that you're saying. So it's really articulating and reflecting that understanding of another's perspective. But the dark side is that you might actually put others' needs first and really not allow yourself to help yourself before you help somebody else, like that oxygen mask thing that you think about, where before you put someone else's oxygen mask on, you need to put on your own mask first. And you might not be able to push them to really rise out of a hole that they might be in, because I like to think of empathy as being in a hole. If someone's in a hole, you climb down with them and you connect with something in yourself that connects with that other person that you might have experienced before. But if you're not able to lift them out of their hole and you just sit in that hole with them, then it's a little bit difficult to be able to move on and to progress. But if you have a low level of empathy, you might have a complete lack of awareness or even interest in others' feelings or emotions that are around you. And again, it's that listening to respond rather than listening to understand. You're thinking about your next point and you've tuned out to what the other person is saying. And so that really demonstrates a lack of empathy if you're not really engaging with somebody else. So empathy, I would say, this one is something I've really worked on, especially with my coaching practice, because you really have to hone in on people and listen to what they're saying and really connect with that person and reflect what they're saying back. And so this is something I would say that I'm actually high in. And what about you, Danny? Are you high, low, or somewhere in the middle?
Yeah, I see. This one, Lauren, reminds me of the other one where at first I struggle with, but I've realized that when you're so absorbed with your emotions, how you're feeling, that's difficult as it is, but understanding what other people are going through and thankfully through getting involved with the union and seeing and hearing other people's stories, I was able to have a better understanding, appreciation of how important empathy is. And by doing this job now, when people are calling us with COVID-19 and we're listening to what they're saying, we're like, you know what? Yeah, that I could see why you'd be frustrated. That I would be frustrated as well. And we need to understand where they're coming from so we can defend their best interest, not just is it right or is it wrong, but how would I feel this happened to me? And it's so important for us to help our members, for us to understand this empathy, but for them as well, for their careers, to understand where their bosses are coming from, where their employees are coming from. So again, this is one that I'd say I was in the lower side, and I've been able to increase because it just makes for more pure and honest relationships. It's fantastic.
Yeah. Yeah, and I feel like a lot of people don't necessarily recognize the importance of empathy in the workplace and how, like you said, where over your career it's improved when you realize it is important, that there is a place for emotions and understanding and compassion in the workplace. And it's not just a place to work. And that's really how you're able to kind of rise within the ranks, is when you demonstrate that compassion and you demonstrate that understanding of others' experiences. So if you're really struggling with how to show an empathic response to somebody, if they're sharing something that's really difficult, they're trying to disclose to you what they're going on during this what's going on with them during this pandemic, and you're not really sure how to respond, we'll start with what not to say. So one thing is, I know how you feel, or it'll be okay. You don't know for sure if it's going to be okay. They're there, don't cry, cheer up. Really diminishing the emotions that they're experiencing, or put that aside, or be brave. Don't feel that way, or at least, the dreaded at least. An empathic response never begins with at least. So Brene Brown, she's an expert in the subject of empathy, and she talks about always avoiding at least, because you think of the example of someone talking to you about how, oh, because of COVID-19, my marriage is ending. And you say, well, at least you are married in the first place. Not the most empathic of responses, so stay away from that one. Or keep a stiff upper lip, and then the same thing happened to me once. Staying away from this one because it makes it about you rather than the other person. So what can you do to show an empathic response and build your empathy? So it involves emotionally monitoring others. So I'm sure there's somebody in your life, whether it's your mother or your spouse, there's always somebody who knows when something is just off with you. You don't even have to say anything. They just know something's wrong. That's because they've gotten to know you and they've become in tune with your behavior and your emotions. And you can do that with the people around you, whether it's your employees or your colleagues. You can tell when something's off with somebody and when they might need somebody to talk to. So you can monitor the people around you, get to know their behaviors, and then know when something might be off with them. And this is something, if there's one thing that I'd want you to take away from this, or something that you try, it's really this, is developing your active listening skills. So something that you can try is find somebody, whether it's a colleague, it's an employee of yours, maybe your spouse, set up a 15-minute time slot with them where you just sit down and that person will just talk for 15 minutes. And you will not respond at all during the 15 minutes. So all you do at the beginning is ask them to talk about something in their life that they would like to change. And then you sit and you listen, and you really listen. So what you can do if you have to spur the conversation along is reflecting statements. So repeating the exact terminology and words that they used. And you might start it with something like, I'm hearing that, or you might say, oh, well, it seems to me that, and then repeating the words that they're saying. And then notice and observe their body language. If they've stopped talking and something they've done, they're really rising in their chair or they're leaning forward, notice that body language. Point it out, said, I noticed when you were talking about that, you really started to lean forward. Or I noticed that your voice started to raise and your energy went up as you talked about that. And also, if you absolutely need to, you can ask a question to just keep it going. But all I want you to really do here is just listen to the person. And you'll really be surprised at how just listening will actually affect their how they're feeling about this subject. And they might actually make some progress and start seeing things a little bit differently by just asking these questions. And then become comfortable with silence. I think a lot of people, if there's a pause in a conversation, they try to fill the silence by just speaking. But if you just let the silence sit with this person, they'll start talking on their own, and they might actually say something that they might not have said unless you gave them the space to just say it. And then there could be some revelations there that happen. And for yourself, make sure that you maintain eye contact. You maintain an open body posture, so no crossing legs, no crossing arms, just keeping your hands on your lap and maybe doing some slight nodding as someone talks, but really be mindful of your own body language as well. And so I'd like you to just try this. Try this with a colleague or a coworker and just see what the experience is like. If you find that it's really difficult for you to actually do this, then it might be something you want to try again and again and again and again, especially if you have a team and you're a manager, because it could be that you're not really listening to your employees if you really struggle with this exercise. So give it a try and see what happens. And I'd actually love to hear from people if they do try it and to see what that experience is like for them. But something else you can do is to schedule a regular check-in with your team. If you're a manager, or even if you just have colleagues that you know are going through a particularly tough time during the pandemic, just set up a 15-minute Zoom chat with them, or if you can't use Zoom in the government, you could try Teams. Something that'll actually just allow you to show that person, hey, I care about you and I want to know what's going on with you during the pandemic. It doesn't even have to be somebody who's going through a particularly tough time. If you're a manager, you could set this up every 15 minutes, once a week for each employee. And someone, I'm sure, will really appreciate that time, just showing that you care. And this is especially important for managers. I hope that managers really hone in on this one in particular, is to exercise patience with your employees, flexibility and understanding, because everyone is going through a really difficult time, especially people who have kids that they have to look after while trying to work full time. If they have potentially maybe parents who are in the hospital or family members who are struggling with COVID-19, just exercise a little bit of patience and flexibility. And if you show that compassion and that understanding, if you really are worried about productivity or maybe deadlines that are falling behind, just by showing that empathy and that compassion, people will feel motivated to do the work. And you'll find that your team, when they feel supported, they'll want to do the work. They'll want to get things done. So it's really imperative that managers can show that patience and that flexibility. I'm going to skip this just because of time. And then stress tolerance. So we're really getting into the stress management component. I'm going to talk about the last two competencies will relate to stress management, because I'm sure that many of you are really stressed out right now because of COVID-19. There's a lot going on and there's so much uncertainty. So if you're really able to develop this stress management composite scale, it really sets you up for success in your entire life, whether it's in work or at home. So a high level of stress tolerance looks like someone who can cope with stressful or difficult situations. They can manage their workloads, they can establish priorities, they're able to meet deadlines, and they perform really well under pressure. That sounds wonderful to me. But if you have too much of this stress tolerance, then you might not have a purpose or a drive, because a lot of the time when people are really stressed out about things, it's because they care so deeply about the outcome. So if you're not so caring about how things turn out, then it might be that you're missing that purpose and that drive, and you might need to look at that self-actualization component. Or you might be asking too much of your employees. So for example, if you're a manager and you have a high level of stress tolerance, there might be people on your team who don't have a high level of stress tolerance. Because you're delegating, you're taking on more and more stuff because you can handle it. Your employees might not be able to handle it, and they might be suffering as a result. And then low stress tolerance looks like someone who might be consciously feeling anxious or overwhelmed. They might crumble under pressure. They might feel a low level of resilience. So when it comes to stress tolerance, I'd say I'm about the middle. Most of the time I can perform under pressure, speaking in front of a crowd, that sort of thing doesn't bother me. It's mostly when, for example, I suffer from anxiety. So if I find that in particularly stressful situations, when my anxiety crops up, that's when I find that things can be a little bit more difficult for me. So I'm about the middle. Danny, what about you? High, low, or in the middle for stress tolerance?
Yeah, I've got good stress tolerance, but also because I was able to develop tools. Like one of the things for me is I find running on the treadmill, I hate it, but it's really good for my stress. I'll do a good 15, 20 minutes of cardio, intense cardio, and even leading up to it, I'm not excited for the cardio itself, but I am excited because it's such a stress release where we all have responsibilities either professionally or personally, and we need to have an outlet. So identify that you are stressed out and you need to have a way to just release that. So for me, the treadmill, again, despite not me being a fan of it, I know how much more of a better mindset it puts me on, just a quick 20 minutes. So that's definitely how I deal with it.
Mm-hmm. The endorphins, and it just clears your brain, it clears your head, and you just get so much, you feel so good afterwards that it's worth the pain. So if you're really not sure how stressed out that you might be, this stress curve is a great gauge for that. So there's actually a peak level of stress. You might not have known that. There's such a thing as too little stress, where you're not pushing yourself to really excel, to be better if you're in that green area. So the optimum area is that yellow area. But if you find you're pushing into the orange, where you're going into the fatigue, the exhaustion, that's when the stress can really become an overload. And then you might get into the red, whereas when those mental health issues might start to crop up, whereas anxiety, panic, anger, or even potentially a mental breakdown. So identify where you are on the stress curve and do it fairly frequently. If you do find that you're in the orange or you're in the red, communicate. It's important to, whether it's because of work that's causing the stress, that you need to talk to somebody about it. And you need to potentially have a conversation with your manager. If you find that you have more and more work on your plate because things have been building and your coworkers are off on 699 and you have too much that you're not able to handle, it might be time to have a conversation with your manager. And you can reach out to ACFO, to Labor Relations, and they can help you figure out how to approach your manager to have this conversation, so that you can show, I'm a team player, I want to take on responsibilities to help everybody out, but this is too much. So you can reach out to ACFO Labor Relations to have that conversation. And if you're a manager, you can, and you're feeling that stress, you can delegate some of your tasks, but you have to make sure that you check in with your team to see if you're in the orange. Before you might delegate something to them, make sure they're not in the red. And then leverage your self-actualization. So if you're able to find those passions and those values that drive you in life, this stress that you might experience feels temporary, because like Danny said, when you go for a jog, if you have a high level of self-actualization, you're doing it because you want to improve yourself and you want to be better. So if you leverage that level of self-actualization to spend your time relieving stress, doing the things that you love, then it can feel, the life's trials and tribulations can feel a lot easier. And then if you really find that you're struggling, you're in the red, you're in the throes of your stress and your emotions, the 4x4 breathing technique is incredibly effective for lowering your heart rate, allowing your amygdala hijack that may have happened in your brain that causes the fight, flight, or freeze reaction to really bring you down to a more rational level of thinking. So it involves breathing in for 4 counts, holding it for 4 counts, breathing out for 4 counts, and holding it for 4 counts. So I'm going to try it right now. Hopefully Danny will join me, and hopefully everyone else at home will join me as well for this. So we'll start. Inhale in 3, 2, 1. Inhale. Hold for 4. Exhale. 2, 3, 4. And hold. And you repeat this 4 times. And you'll find that your just general tightness in your body, the stress that you're feeling will just ease a little bit if you're able to repeat that breathing technique. And then Danny talked about how he likes to run to relieve his stress. And for me, I like to read, I like to go outside. There's so many things that I like to do to be able to just take some time away from what I'm experiencing the day-to-day. And hopefully you have something in mind that you're able to do, but if you don't, then you can ask the people around you. You can ask your manager, you can ask your colleagues and say, hey, what do you like to do to helpfully relieve stress? And you might find that there's something that someone mentions that you like the idea of doing that, and you could even do it together. So for example, if you have colleagues or maybe your manager, everyone says, I like to just relax and have a cup of coffee. Well, maybe you could set up a Teams chat and just do that for 15 minutes on a Tuesday morning and just take the time to chat with each other and have a coffee together. Because I find that if you find other people who are going through the same thing that you are and you're able to relieve that stress together, it makes things it feels a lot easier to be able to tackle these tough situations that might be coming up during COVID-19. And then the last one is optimism. So this one is involving having a high positive attitude and a positive outlook on life. You remain hopeful and resilient despite setbacks. So, being able to see the light at the end of the tunnel during this pandemic when a lot of really scary things are happening. People are getting sick and, your work might be really stressful and there's a lot more responsibilities that people are taking on, but you're still able to remain hopeful and resilient. And high optimism allows you to ward off stress, eliminates barriers to achievement. You're able to inspire others because optimism is infectious. But unfortunately, the dark side of optimism, I know this well because optimism is one of my highest competencies. I'm sure that's a shocker to many of you, is having the idea of rose-colored glasses. So you might be like the dog in this picture here, where there's fire going around you and you're just saying, oh, it's going to be fine, it'll be okay. You might not actually plan for some things that you probably should be planning for. And you might not be able to handle people's negativity. But if you're low in optimism, you're a glass half empty kind of person, you're really fearful about the future and you're afraid of failure, and you expect and you would plan for the worst instead of planning for the best. So I'm high in optimism. Danny, where do you fall?
I am high, and I'll tell you why I became high. I was already high, but I was when I was working in the private sector for a bank. One of my coworkers was really a Debbie Downer. I mean, whatever happened, he was always negative, and renouncing bonuses. And he's like, well, how come there's more in this? And that was really eye-opening to me to see how, wow, look, even through good news, this person always found the flaw. So when you mentioned, Lauren, that it is contagious, it is, and the positive side it as well. So whenever something happens, that doesn't mean we dismiss the negatives of life, but we find a way to say, okay, well, what can I do here to optimize or do something better or find a lesson out of this so that people see you're someone they want to hang around with, because you're not going to always someone who's complaining all the time. No one wants to be around someone that complains all the time, even if they have a good cause to complain. At some point, you got to turn around and say, you know what? Okay, what can I do? How can I do something better out of this? So it's also something that I can actually better control myself than other competencies that are around here. So this one, yes, I would rate myself high on that one.
Yes, and I can definitely attest to that. Being your employee, you do a great job at spreading optimism, positivity through the team, and it makes it a great place to work at ACFO. So definitely appreciate that high competency about Danny. But if you don't find that you're high in optimism, there are strategies that you can really employ to try to improve that in yourself. Kind of a fake it till you make it scenario. So sharing positive feedback with your team. You don't have to be a manager. You can do this with your colleagues. If there's someone who's done a really good job, someone you're really impressed with, maybe someone who's taken on extra responsibilities during the pandemic, just acknowledge that. Share positive feedback. Tell people when they're doing a great job, because you'll find that that attitude will spread throughout the team, especially if it goes from person to person, and especially if you get it back, because oftentimes when you pay a compliment, people will pay you a compliment back. So you can find out that way also what people appreciate about you and what you're doing well. And then if you are that person who always plans for the worst case scenario, try just one time to identify the best yet realistic possible outcome. So if you're quick to jump to that worst case scenario, just try one time to find, okay, how could this work out really well? So if you're struggling with a lot of responsibilities in your role, you can say, well, if this were to work out really great, what might happen? Well, I've developed a lot of resiliency, and year end happens year after year. Maybe next year end, I'll feel like it's a walk in the park because I've gone through what I've gone through now. Just putting a positive spin and a positive outcome to a potentially negative situation can really help you just change and flip a switch in how your brain works and the default mode of your brain. And then you can leverage things in the past that you've overcome. So if you're struggling with a situation now, think of a similar situation you've had in the past. And if you're here today, it's most likely that you got through that situation just fine. So ask yourself, what did I do before that worked really well? And then visualization. This is such a good one. So when I do my coaching sessions, there are 6 pillars, and visualization is the third pillar. So it's really asking yourself, what is it that I want? What is the ideal outcome? And then just taking a minute to visualize it. What does it look like? Where are you? What does it feel like? What are you doing? What will your life be like in this scenario? And how are you going to get there? So high performance athletes really use visualization as a technique. Like Bianca Andreescu, she's a tennis player, and she used visualization. She credited her win against Serena Williams in the US Open to visualization. So it's something that if you're really able to see yourself succeeding, then you have a better idea of what you need to do to get there, and you can really lay out the steps. And then this is the last point, is to recognize optimism is a choice. You can choose to be optimistic. At the very end of this, I have some recommendations for books, and these 2 people who wrote 2 books related to optimism, they had about as terrible of a situation in life as someone could possibly have, and yet they chose optimism, and hope is what propelled them through all of the tough times that they had. So if you do find, though, that you just cannot choose optimism, if you've tried and tried and tried, and it's just not a choice that you feel like you can make, there is the Employee Assistance Program that's available in the public service. As public servants, you're so lucky to have these services readily available for you. So you can reach out and talk to somebody if you just can't get out of that hole. But hopefully these strategies, if you give them a try, will be able to lift you out of that. And now quickly, just so that we can get to some questions, for your action plan, I want you to think about the best idea that you got from today. So whether it was the active listening, whether it was one of the optimism tips of planning out your best case scenario, what's something that you're going to take away from today? And what's your next opportunity to use it? So if you want to do that active listening exercise, when are you going to do it? Are you going to do it this week? Are you going to do it next week? Who are you going to do it with? How are you going to do it? And then set a SMART goal for it. So for example, you could say to yourself, I'm going to listen to 5 different people do their listening exercise in the next month. And that way you have a specific goal because it's very a narrow focus. It's measurable. You'll know whether or not you did 5. It's attainable. It's not like saying I'm going to do 5 by the end of the day tomorrow. It's a realistic time period. It's relevant because it's helping you improve your empathy, and it's time-based. You're saying it's by the end of the month. I'm going to do this in 1 month. And then how are you going to be accountable? What are you going to be able to do to make sure that you get this done? So will you have someone else that you share this goal with? Are you going to be able to keep yourself accountable? So maybe even sharing it with somebody. If you make this goal public, you're probably a lot more likely to want to do it and achieve it. And then check in on yourself every 2 weeks. Where are you on this plan? Because if you think about your emotional intelligence as muscles, you're not going to just magically improve your emotional intelligence by listening to this 145-minute seminar. It's like going to the gym one time and then never going back. You have to constantly go back. You have to go back to the gym 3 times a week for several months in order for your emotional intelligence muscles to really build. So you have to put in the time. So I'm hoping if there's one thing that you take away from today, is that you have to work at it. You have to make a plan and you have to check in, because you're not just going to be magically emotional intelligent by sitting there and listening to a presentation. You have to put the work in. The work is not now. The work is in the future. And if you really love this topic, then we can talk about this even more for the CTC course, the Controllership Training Center course, Leading with Emotional Intelligence, and it's led by yours truly. So it's a full day course where you learn about all 15 competencies, and you can do an assessment to actually see what your scores are in these different competencies. Because you might have thought, oh, I'm high in this, or oh, I'm a bit low on that. But you can find out for sure when you do the assessment, and then really learn some specific techniques. And one of the most common questions I get after these presentations is, you mentioned reading. I'd love to know what I could read to improve my emotional intelligence. Here are some great books that you could pick up. I've read all of these. This is my personal recommendations. They're not ACFO's recommendations. So feel free to pick any of these up. You could take a picture with your phone, or you could refer to the recording later, but I'm going to skip ahead because I want to make sure that there's time for questions. So thank you so much, everybody, for listening. I'm hoping that there's something you picked up today, whether it was a tip or just the fact that you need to build your muscles, that will really kind of help you along in your journey to emotional intelligence.
Thank you very much, Lauren. Great presentation. And I know it was very difficult to squeeze this into a 45-minute presentation. This is a whole day training. Look, I forgot to read Lauren's bio here because she's been working with ACFO for 5 years. And her team, they're really in charge of engaging with you guys, the members, and she's doing a great job at it. She's got her Bachelor in Communication from Carleton University. She's delivered this training to hundreds of federal public servants, Treasury Board, she's delivered it there. This is such an important thing. Like, emotional intelligence, we know is such a big thing for our members that we are lucky enough to have Lauren, and she's getting certified as a coach. She's going through Concordia University in Montreal. We know it's important for our members because every time a case gets created at ACFO, so when you guys contact us and you talk to our labor relations advisors, often they realize that more emotional intelligence maturity could have de-escalated the situation. So we're investing heavily in training our members for them to understand the importance of emotional intelligence. So let's get to the questions. Again, you see them on the screen right now. If you have a question to ask for Lauren, you go on slido.com, you put in the code ACFO-ACAF. And Lauren, we'll start with the questions really related to the EI, and I'll take the other ones afterwards. So what about this one? What do I do if my boss has low emotional intelligence? How do you bring that up with someone? It's a great question. We've all seen this where your boss, you're like, oh, okay, I get emotional intelligence or I'm working on it, but my boss is not really aware. How do you recommend we approach that, Lauren?
Yeah, that's a tough one. But the first thing that I'll say is that it's really hard to change somebody else's behavior. And the only person's behavior that you can control is your own behavior. So something I always say to coaching clients, sometimes they come to me and their topic that they bring for their session is, oh, I want to be able to change this person's behavior. And what I try to do is bring it back to that person's behavior. So how can you improve your own response to that person? So this is when you can employ your high levels of emotional intelligence with this person. So if you find that they have a lack of empathy, maybe demonstrate a high level of empathy with them. use some of those techniques. Maybe ask them if they want to do that listening exercise, and you might learn a lot of things about that person that you realize that they're going through, and just having you show that empathy for them makes them become more cognizant of their own empathy. But if you do find that it's come to a point where it's at a point of conflict, you can always reach out to labor relations at ACFO, and they could potentially mediate a conversation between you and your manager, or even just present you with your options, because they're never going to talk to your manager without your own consent. It's a good way to just find out what options you have if you do find that your manager just doesn't have those soft skills and you're finding that it's hard to be able to respond.
Love that answer, Lauren. Very good points. Completely agree with you on that one. The next question we have, I'll answer the first part. Does the Canada School have courses on emotional intelligence? No, they do not, but they should. They definitely should. But Lauren, what would you recommend for courses? I know you already talked about this, but another question talks about books, which you touched on, but any recommendations on people who want to get more familiar with this?
Yeah, I mean, if you really do like this subject and you want to know more about emotional intelligence, there is the Controllership Training Center course. Potentially, if you have your team, you want to do a course for your whole team, that's something that ACFO can provide. We can come to your workplace, maybe when COVID-19 isn't happening, but we can come to your workplace and we can give this presentation and we can do a full day seminar for your team. And yeah, the books are great. I definitely recommend them. And if you really are into the EQI 2.0 model, you can do what I did and you can become certified to administer the model.
Thanks, Lauren. And one thing she mentioned as well is that assessment, the test. It's good for people to take. I call it a quiz, but you know, there's metrics on this, and you can actually see, are you low and high on each competency model, and through that session that Lauren does, it really helps people know where they are. So yeah, they can definitely set that up if people are really interested. The next two questions are about return to work, so I'll skip these for now. I'll get back to them later. Maybe the third question, how can I approach my manager to invest in my emotional intelligence training and soft skills when technical courses have more been tangible results? That's a good question.
Yeah, and that one's tough because I think with soft skills, it's a lot harder to make them tangible and to show, oh, that I was actually able to provide this output, or I was able to do this or do that in your workplace because of your emotional intelligence. Whereas with hard skills like Excel or SAP, some of those other programs, it's a lot more tangible. So what I'd say is that emotional intelligence, it really has such a huge reach when it comes to the impact that it has, especially if you're a manager, because when you have a high level of emotional intelligence, you're more productive, you have less stress, you have a better output, you're able to really do more in the workplace, and you're able to make the people around you feel more comfortable too, because you're better at expressing yourself, you build better relationships. And this really translates to the higher ranks as well. So if you're putting this on your learning plan and you're saying, I'd love to be able to maybe move from an FI2 to an FI3, and all of a sudden you'd have staff members, putting emotional intelligence training on there is an excellent way to develop your managerial skills, because it's not about just you and being better and knowing who you are and what skills you bring to the table, but it allows you to really express those skills. It allows you to build relationships, to be a better problem solver, to manage the stress of not only yourself, but of your team. So there's just so many different ways that I don't even know where to begin. So you can always do a little bit of research and find some specific skills. Like something someone shared with me on Twitter today was that emotional intelligence, the demand for it is expected to increase 600% over the next decade, I think it is. So, it really can give you that leg up.
Thank you, Lauren. I'll take maybe some quick fire questions here, non-EI related, but just so we can answer these because they were voted up. The first one, has consideration been taken that a majority of the people will be even more stressed coming back to work? Yeah, look, it's absolutely. Even now, people are not at work, they're staying at home, and it's causing anxiety. So we're seeing increased rates of the employee assistance program, and we have to work around that to understand that we're more, like Lauren said, as your manager, you want to be flexible and understanding, and EI will really tap into that. So EI really surrounds not just your work, but your whole life. Next question, what would be the typical average work from home day post-COVID? Is that safe to say everyone will telework at least 1 or 2 days a week? I mean, I don't have a crystal ball, but yeah, it will definitely make it more feasible and easy for people to telework. And I really don't see any reasons for people to going back to work anytime soon, at least not for our members. As long as you have the equipment you need at home, there's no rush. And when we do go back to work, I would see it's more of a rotational basis, right? So I agree with this person, maybe 1 or 2 days of telework, go back to work here and there, but it'll be a gradual. It won't be a definite, everyone open up the valve and we're back up there. Are these sessions eligible for PD, professional development, for CPA? I would definitely say yes. The reason I can't say for sure is because it depends which province you live in, but EI would definitely be, it's relevant to your work, so I would say yes, but we don't issue a credit though. I want to go back to a question on EI. These are all COVID. Okay, can my manager refuse my request for leave with income averaging for operation requirements? What is the deadline to submit my LOA for this year? Your manager can deny it for operation requirements, but if you disagree with those operation requirements, perhaps contact us at ACFO. There is no deadline by TBS. There might be a deadline from your department, but not for TBS. So again, if it's being denied, doesn't make sense to you, contact ACFO. Lauren, did you see a question on there? Do you want to take on EI? I see a lot of questions on COVID, but.
There's something there that says, rather than being static, can a person normally with high stress tolerance drastically shift to low stress tolerance due to external factors and pressures? The answer is yes, absolutely. So while someone might take an assessment that might actually give them a score, if you're taking it at a time that you're going through extreme pressure, such as COVID-19, it might not give you an accurate reflection of what you're actually experiencing in your normal state. So yes, the answer is absolutely. And that's kind of when you can leverage some of your other stronger skills, and you can employ some of those stress tolerance techniques, like the breathing techniques, especially if you find that you're not normally as stressed out as you are during COVID-19 or a similar experience of stress. So that's definitely a possibility. And I wouldn't, again, this comes back to the point I mentioned in self-actualization, is don't beat yourself up for it. It's an incredibly tough time, and everyone should hopefully be giving everyone flexibility and really easing the stresses of others as much as possible.
Absolutely, and we got to wrap it up here, friends. So just maybe again, quick fire for the vacation questions. Again, a communique is going to be issued today. But if your departments are asking you to take vacation at a certain period that is not good for you, please contact us. And also, if your workload is too high that you can't, say you want to take vacation, but you got too much work to do, contact us. You know, you should have a manageable workload. It's not fair to you if you're dumping workload on you. And the last question we got was, can we get a copy of this presentation? Yes, you had to email us though, because we don't know who you are, because it's anonymous. So if you want a copy of the presentation, I'm sure Lauren can send that to you. Just contact us at ACFO. I have to end it there with questions because I actually got another meeting to attend with Okro. I'd like to thank everyone for attending this session. There's a lot of people there today. And again, if you want to hear more about Lauren, she can make other presentations, and you'll see her again because she works closely with ACFO. I'd like to thank Lauren Doty. Thank you very much for being here today. It was a great presentation, and we'll see each other again very shortly. Thanks to everyone in the back office working on the technical side. So we'll see you next week, which is going to be la présentation en français next week in French. Bye tout le monde.